Welcome to this lecture. This lecture is about the object-oriented programming. So Python supports multiple programming paradigms. So we have already seen about the functional programming, that is defining the function to do tasks, that is following the DRY principle, that is don't repeat yourself technique, and we have learned about packing and unpacking the arguments through the functional programming. So now in this lecture we are going to learn about the objects. So we'll simply perform the same functional programming but with the creation of the object, that is making the instances and creating the class in object and seeing the most basic advantage and basically the paradigm of the object oriented programming. So let's get started. So before that, let me tell you about the object. So what is basically object? Let me open my document over here. So you could see we have the object over here, bird. So this is object. So just think bird is an object and we have the attribute and methods to this object. So first of all, this object has its attribute, it has its own properties. So you can see this bird can have the name, so this bird can have its age. So these are the properties or the attribute to this bird. So if you make another object, they can have their different name or their different age. So this is basically unique. So attributes will be unique to each of these objects. So this is bird, or basically if you make something like, let me say, penguin. So if you make the penguin object, it will have different name, it will have different age. And if you make something, let me say, parrot or sparrow, then it will have different name and different age. You can say same case for the sparrow. So each of these objects will have unique name and age, but their method will be common. They can sing, they can dance. So bird object having that, let me say, we'll make the class as a bird in this lecture, and we'll see how this object oriented programming works under the hood. So first of all, let me just open my script over here, and I have just saved this script. So first of all, in order to create the class, you have to call with this keyword saying class, so all in the lowercase. And now let me say bird is my class. So let's give the colon to represent that we are creating this bird class. So now we are inside this class. So first of all, in the class we'll have the attributes. So you can simply say something like species, so that will be bird. So this is your parameters, or what we call the attributes. So you can see these are the attribute to this bird. So species will be bird, and the next one is your method to the class. So let me just define one real quick function over here. So if you just remember, we have to define the method in the class, that is with this def keyword. So if you just remember, in the previous couple of lectures we have defined the function with this same def keyword. So that means this is also a function, but this is bound to particular class. So if any function is bound to any particular class, we normally call it as a method, but it is same as function. We will define it with a def keyword. Now let's do something like double underscore init and double underscore. So this is the first main method of any class. So just remember that this is the first method, which is init method, and we normally call it as a constructor in other programming language like Java. So if you just see over here, what we are doing is we're just making a constructor, and let me just type here real quick and show you what is going over here. So if you just remember, in the document over here, I've said you that this is the object, it will have its own attribute, name and the age. So we are just defining a constructor, that is the first method to this class bird, with this init method, and this method has this self. So this self is bound to particular object. So just remember, the first argument to any method of the class is going to be self. If you make any other method, let me say the new method, and that will be sing, then the any method, the first argument should be self. So just remember that. If you just remove the self, it is not going to work. So you have to put every time the self as a first parameter in the method of the classes. So if you see here, after the self we have the name and the age. So these are the attribute to to the particular object. So let me say self this, and the next one would be song. Okay, we'll just pass as a song, which is going to be sing by the bird, and we'll just say return by formatting something, and I'll just say sings, and let's format with format keyword. We know how to format, that is by the format function. And now if you say something like name and the song that you just pass, this is not going to work. So let me show you why this is not going to work. So before that, I have to make the object. So first of all, just remember, in the object oriented programming, first part is creating a class that we just create here with the class keyword, giving the name of the class. And just remember that the naming convention over here, class name always starts with the uppercase, that is B over here is capital. If you make any other class like bike, then B will be capital over here. So this is a bird class, so the first letter of the class will be in upper cases. And after that, the first method of any class is a init method, which is the constructor, and this method is going to be called when you instantiate the class's object. So if you make the instances of the class, then this method is going to be called automatically. So let me show you how to just make instances of the classes. So in order to make the instances, you have to give the name to that object. So first of all, let me say the bird will be penguin. So penguin is my bird, so this is the name, so this is the name of the object. So after that, you have to type the class's name, so that is bird. Okay, we are just making a class name here, bird, so this is a bird, and give the parenthesis. So I have told you before that to make the object of the class, the first method that is going to be invoked is this constructor. So when you just pass this as a bird, when you just create this penguin as an object of this bird class, this method is going to be called automatically. And if you see here, we have different argument to this function or the method. So first is self. So self is particularly just denoting that this is the current object. So self should not be assigned, but this name and age should be assigned. So let's give the name and the age to this bird. So the penguin bird will be he. Okay, I'm just giving the name randomly, and the age is, let me say, 4. So if you do this, then you have created the penguin object of this bird class, and this method is going to be invoked. And if you see here self, so if you see here, this self is pointing to this particular object. That means you need not have to explicitly assign this self value over here. You need not have to be passed, but except self, all of these arguments should have the positional argument right here. So we are just giving he to this name, we are giving 4 to this age. Now if you see here, this self is pointing to this particular penguin. That means we are making this name and age of this bird class pointing to this penguin, and we are just denoting that this name should be he and this age should be 4. That means we are assigning this he and 4 to the object class attribute. So if I talk here about this attribute or the properties of the object, that is name and age, that means we are just saying something like, okay, assign this bird name and age as the class attribute. So we are just doing that. So let me just roll it back again, and now if you just see here, we are creating this penguin class. So that means we have now name and we have now age. But let's go over here, and we have to now call the sing method. Let me just call this sing method. So sing method is not the init method or the constructor. So in order to call any other method that is beyond that normal method or basically constructor, that is going to be called with the object. So first of all, just give the object name which we just created over here, that is penguin dot sing. So dot is to be given period, and this method is to be called. So if I say penguin dot sing, and now we have to pass song, because I have already told self is not to be assigned by anything, but the song has to be assigned. So if I say hello is the song that the penguin is singing, so if I just call this, then let's see if this is going to work or not. So obviously this is not going to work, and I'll show you why. So it is saying that name is not defined. So let's go and see why it is not defined. So the interpreter is not showing any error while creating the object. That means we have successfully created the penguin object. But while defining or while calling this sing method over here from this object, we are getting error. So hello has been passed as a song. If we see here, this song is not the attribute of the class. If it has to be attribute of the class, it should be assigned over here, and it should be given with the name of self dot song to be the song, because we have to assign it with the self, because we are just denoting to this class attribute, but it is not the song which is the attribute. That means you don't need to just do something like self dot song, because it is not your class attribute. But if you see this name is class attribute, which is this attribute. We are not passing anything from here, so that means it should have self dot name, which is just denoting to this penguin object and this song. So if I save this again and let's press F5, and okay, it is not doing anything because we're just returning but we are not printing. Let's go over here and print this. Let's save this, press F5. It is saying he sings hello. He was the bird name. Obviously let's give something name here. Green is bird name, and it is saying hello is singing. So let's save this and press F5. Then it is saying green sings hello. That means we have now successfully called this sing method of this bird class from this object, which is penguin object. So you can see we are making the instances here. So this is instance, which is obviously the object penguin, and it is called from this bird class. And if you just make the instances, the class or basically the method that is going to be invoked automatically is this init method, which is obviously your constructor, and this self is just denoting to this object. That means we don't need to pass anything to the self, and after that this is all the positional argument which should be passed while calling this bird class, and that is with the green is the name, 4 is the age. If you want to reference the age, you can just go here and let's see sings, and his age is, you can format now. But now we are just passing self.name at this position, song is passed at this position, and age should be passed at this placeholder. But now again, if you say something like only age, and let's save this and press F5, then it is not going to run again, because age is not defined, because age is the class attribute. So if you want to access the class attribute, it should be from this self. So if you just remember, or if you are from any other programming language like Java, it should be something like this in the case of Java. So this is in the case of Java, we are just pointing to the particular object, and in the case of Python it is done with self keyword. Let's save this and press F5, and it will show us green sings hello and his age is 4. So we have successfully created the bird class over here, penguin, and we have seen how to just define a method. So next thing is we have seen here the methods is sing and the dance. So let's create this dance method also. So you know how to create the method now. So it is done inside the class, and we'll say dance, and now the first argument to this method will be self, and we don't want anything to be passed, only self. That means we'll just make the function over here, we'll just return something from this function, and that is just is now dancing. So let's format this, and this should be formatted with, let me say, name. So if you again do only name, then this is not going to work, because this name is your class object, so it should be just referenced with this self keyword, because it is the class attribute, just remember that. And now if you just go down here, and in order to call this dance object, you have to call from your penguin. So before that, let me print again, and it should be penguin, which is your object, and in order to invoke any method of the class, you have to just give the period, and the dance is the method you want to invoke. And if you just pass here nothing, that means if you see, I have already told that self need not to be assigned, and after self there is nothing. That means you will just simply call this dance. If I save this now and press F5, you will see green is now dancing. That means we have just created the penguin here class. And now you can also create any other object. So let me say parrot is my next object. So it is also a bird. It is also created from the bird class. And now blue is the parrot, which is obviously not true. Green will be the parrot, but let me say it is blue and 5 is the age. And you can now just call this. Okay, it should be printed first. And let me again now call this sing method. Let's see how this works. So if you see in this sing, you have to call with the song. So we have to pass the song again. Hey hey is the song. Let's save this again. Press F5. You will see now blue sings hey hey and his age is 5, which we just pass here, which is basically the parrot object, and we are just calling this, which will be assigned to this age and name. And now parrot is also singing. So you can see we can make the instances of the class multiple time or many time. You can also make another bird. Now if you make sparrow, and okay, sparrow, and it is also created from the bird class, and it will have the different name. Let me say or is the name, and it will be 45 days. And let's print this again with sparrow now, and it is also singing something. Haha is singing. Let's close this, save this, press F5. We'll see or sings haha and his age is 45. So one thing you can see over here is every object will have different attributes, which is name and age. So you can see penguin has different name, different age. Parrot has different name, different age. Sparrow has different name, different age. So each of these objects will be different in terms of its properties or the attributes. But if you see here, the method sing and a dance is common for all of these instances. So that is common for penguin, that is common for parrot, because we are just calling the sing and dance for each of this. So that is the important thing of the object oriented paradigm. Will make our object to perform different tasks that is from this bird class, or basically we'll make a class which will be a prototype from which object can do something. So this will be common for many objects, but just remember each of these objects is independent of each other. They can work independent of each other. This penguin can do something else than the parrot, but they will be inherited or they will be derived from this prototype as a class. So in the next lesson we'll learn about the inheritance, the most important programming paradigm of the object oriented. So let's see in the next chapter, which is going to be really interesting chapter. So this will be wrap for this lecture. See you in the next one.